"Excuse me, are you familiar with telephone scam?" asked the bank employee, his face stern. It seems he is concerned about fraud, probably because I, an elderly person, want to withdraw a large sum of money. His sense of justice is appreciated, but it has left me a bit troubled. No matter how much I insist that it's not fraud and I need the money for work, he simply won't listen. Finally, he even says, "I'm terribly sorry, but as per the manager's decision, from today onwards, we cannot serve elderly customers." He has made up his mind that elderly people are susceptible to scams. All this while, my wife silently observed his behavior. Her patience finally wore thin, and she began to laugh mischievously. "Hey, you there, could you contact the manager for me? My name is James, and I'm 66 years old. I retired a few years ago and now live in New York City with my wife, Sarah. Since retiring, I've been enjoying my second life. Some days I volunteer to ensure the safety of elementary school children, and other days I help at events in town. I'm also registered with a seniors employment agency and take on simple tasks when I have time. It's been a fulfilling life every day. Well, I'm off then. Take care." My wife, clad in her light pink jacket, headed out. She is still a career woman, working hard every day. She seems busy every day, but despite that, she appears content with her fulfilling life. Our conversations often reveal how much she enjoys her work. Lately, listening to her work stories during dinner or on weekends has become one of my joys. I handle the household chores since she's busy with her job. Cooking, laundry, cleaning tasks I rarely did while working, leading to initial failures, but I've grown accustomed to them now. At first, I truly appreciated the hard work of housewives. By the way, we have a son and a daughter, both of whom have their own families now. Thankfully, they've blessed us with grandchildren, and I've proudly become a grandfather. They live a bit away but often visit us with their children, much to my delight. Having ample time with my adorable grandchildren who run up to me shouting "Grandpa" is truly healing. Recently, I've found a new hobby. With free time on my hands, I've started a small garden in our backyard. Tending to a home garden like this, you'd be surprised at how many different types of vegetables you can harvest. This sense of accomplishment from harvesting what you've grown yourself is more satisfying than one could imagine. But there's one problem. We often harvest more than we can eat, just the two of us. For now, I'm thinking of making dried vegetables this week. Hopefully, it will turn out well. So, that's how we, having both time and financial freedom, live happily, pursuing our interests. Then, one day, we had an errand at the bank and decided to go together. The nearest branch, just a 10-minute walk from our house, seemed like a nice walk for both of us. However, a few minutes into our walk, we noticed the bank looked somewhat dim. As we got closer, we saw that it was closed with shutters down. It seems they are undergoing renovations. Unfortunately, this meant the bank was closed for the day. "Oh, it's closed," Sarah said, looking up at the notice. "It seems so, but we need to go today. Guess we have no choice but to head to the next town." "That's true, let's do that. How about we dine out too? It's nice to have such days once in a while." Just the two of us, we decided to eat out and visit a bank branch we don't usually go to. The other bank branch we arrived at was extremely crowded, possibly because the nearby branch was closed. All the employees at the counter seemed very busy. "Wow, it's really busy here. Yeah, let's get a ticket from the machine." We approached the ticket machine where a young, seemingly new bank employee was standing. "Excuse me." As we approached the ticket machine, a young bank employee, Ryan, asked, "Excuse me, how can I assist you today?" His name tag read Ryan. "I'm here to withdraw some money." "Understood. For withdrawals, you can use the ATM over there," Ryan politely suggested. However, the amount I needed to withdraw exceeded the ATM limit. I explained this to Ryan, saying, "I need a substantial amount, so I would like to use the counter service, please." Upon hearing this, Ryan's expression changed. "Sir, are you sure you need all that money today? I apologize for asking, but are you aware of telephone scam?" Ryan asked, looking concerned. He must be worried about me. As a bank employee, his sense of justice must have prompted him to ask. Grateful for his concern, I assured him, "It's for work, so it's not fraud." But Ryan wasn't convinced. "Perhaps you should reconsider. Are you sure there's no mistake?" Eventually, he even said, "I find it hard to believe that an elderly person needs such a large amount of money." He seemed utterly convinced it was a scam. Despite my explanations, he adamantly refused to process our request. However, we had our reasons too. We genuinely needed the money for legitimate purposes. Having made the extra effort to come here, we couldn't just back down. After a circular argument, Ryan sighed deeply, realizing we wouldn't give up. Then he said something unexpected. "I'm terribly sorry, but as of now, the manager has decided that we cannot serve elderly customers." To our disbelief, he was arbitrarily trying to force us out. My wife and I exchanged looks of shock. Behind us, a line of other customers had formed, including some elderly people. They all looked somewhat anxious. I asked again, "What exactly do you mean by that?" But Ryan firmly repeated, "Elderly customers cannot be served." His sense of justice now felt oppressive. Suddenly, my wife let out an ominous laugh. This wasn't good. While a puzzled Ryan looked at her, I held my head in my hands. I knew that when my wife laughed like this, she was seriously angry. Deciding Ryan was getting nowhere, she approached another employee. "Excuse me, you there, with the pink tie, could you contact the branch manager for me? Ask him to come to the president's office." My wife called over the bank employee with the pink tie. It was clear that the man with the pink tie was quite senior and held some position of authority. He surveyed the room with a stern gaze. Seeing my wife, his expression turned pale. "Understood, Mrs. Thompson," he exclaimed. "The president of the bank, that lady." His sudden voice and actions stirred a buzz among the surrounding people. The bustling bank came to a momentary halt, and all eyes turned to us. Little did they know, my wife was the president of this mega bank. Today was her day off, but we had business at the bank. Unfortunately, our luck was out, as the nearby bank was closed. Thinking it would be worthwhile to make the trip, we decided to visit this branch for an impromptu inspection. Ryan's face, having grasped the situation from his superior's behavior, turned from pale to ashen. "I'm truly sorry for the disrespectful behavior. Deeply apologize," he said. In the president's office, the branch manager, Michael, apologized us deeply. "Ryan, you apologize too," Michael instructed Ryan. It seemed like a big fuss over nothing. Standing next to my wife, who had erupted in anger, I watched Michael and Ryan. They apologized us again and again. Since entering the room, it felt like I had only heard their apologies. "Why did you behave like that?" my wife asked calmly, fitting of a president. Ryan, prompted by a glance from Michael, responded, "Telephone scam is prevalent, and we were trained to be cautious, especially when elderly customers handle large sums of money." "Of course, that's very important," my wife acknowledged. Ryan's caution was valid, but it was excessive. "We're withdrawing money for a legitimate reason." "Yes, you need to assess each situation carefully. Sometimes it's crucial not to jump to conclusions and to listen to others." Ryan, silenced by her words, hung his head. In fact, Ryan was the youngest employee at this branch. Perhaps that's why he seemed so anxious. Wondering what was driving his urgency, I asked him about it. he replied. I wanted to make a mark for myself. I thought if I consulted a senior, they might take credit for it. Credit. I thought if I could prevent a scam, I'd be praised and maybe even awarded, he said, smiling innocently. We were all taken aback by his reasoning. I couldn't believe he was so worked up for such a reason. His unexpected answer deflated the tension. You can't let your vanity or self-satisfaction cause discomfort to customers. Even if you suspect fraud, you must explain it in a way that doesn't upset them. You were too forceful, my wife explained. Yet, Ryan still seemed somewhat discontented. But this incident turned out to be a fortunate case since we, the insiders, were the victims. If other elderly customers had been treated this way, it could have led to serious damage. A lot of the elderly customers who use our banks in this area are wealthy, aren't they, Michael? My wife asked. Michael quickly nodded in agreement. If they get offended and stop their transactions, do you know the consequences? The bank could suffer losses big enough to cause a shutdown, she explained, and Ryan finally seemed to understand. Realizing his mistake, he apologized once again. My wife nodded quietly in acknowledgement. She then said, not just him, all the staff need re-education, and stood up to leave. Understood. I'm very sorry, Michael replied, his complexion slightly better than before. It seemed like the issue was resolved. Phew, that turned into quite a scene. Now to quickly finish our business and have dinner. That's what I was thinking. At that moment, I believed everything was settled. The four of us left the president's office together. We headed inside the bank to complete our original task. So, you're here for a withdrawal, correct? Instead of a regular bank employee, Michael personally attended to us. Ryan, learning proper conduct, observed Michael closely. Yes, please proceed with the withdrawal, I was about to say, when suddenly, bang! A loud noise echoed through the bank. Rushing to see where it came from, I saw three people wearing ski masks. One of them had raised a gun towards the ceiling. The noise could have been from that gunshot. Then one of the masked men started threatening a female bank employee, hand over the money, holding a survival knife. Startled by the sudden event, Michael collapsed. And Ryan turned pale with fear. A bank robbery. While I felt the urge to panic, I tried to stay calm. Looking again at the ceiling, where the gunshot supposedly hit. It was oddly undamaged. So, it was a bluff. I whispered to my wife, it's okay, that's a toy gun. The barrel is blocked. There's no hole in the ceiling. She nodded slightly after looking up. Hey, you, if you resist, we'll shoot. Follow our orders. Leave your cell phones here and gather together. The employees and customers were herded into one spot, with their cell phones being confiscated. Who's the manager of this store? The robber bellowed. Hearing this, Michael let out another yelp of eek. Such an obvious reaction not only revealed he was the manager, but also made him an easy target for the robbers. As expected, the robber approached Michael and ordered, "Stuff the money in the bag." Michael trembled in fear, shaking uncontrollably. Helpless and frightened, he reluctantly followed the instructions. "Don't you dare call the police," the robber shouted, causing Michael to drop money and stumble in his panic. He must be in a panic. His work was slow and clumsy. Sweat glistened on Michael's face. Just as one of the increasingly irritated robbers approached Michael, about to shout at him again. "Nay na nay na." The faint sound of police sirens began to echo. Although it started off as a small sound, it definitely grew louder and was approaching our location. "Hey, who did it? Who called the cops?" "Bro, that's not the issue here. They are coming." The robbers panicked upon realizing the police had been called. "Damn it, change of plan. Close all the doors and windows." "Hey, you, lower the shutter," the robber ordered Michael. With trembling hands, Michael pressed the lock button. They decided to change their plan and barricade themselves inside the bank. I quickly scanned the hostages. There were a few elderly people, some young women, and only a child about 2 years old. There are no young men with physical strength. Arrange a vehicle for escape. The robber commanded the police using a megaphone. But the police couldn't easily agree to such demands. The police, being careful not to harm the hostages, started negotiations by saying, "Release the hostages first." The negotiations were tough, with neither side giving in. "Mommy, I don't want to be here anymore. I want to go home." A 2-year-old child started fussing. Hungry, scared, the little girl who had been quietly enduring finally reached her limit. "Hey, shut that kid up," the leader yelled, approaching the mother and daughter. Then the man pointed the gun at the mother and daughter. While it was actually a toy, the terror it instilled in those unaware was considerable. The mother, completely terrified, held her child protectively and apologized. But the child was only 2 years old. Despite her mother's attempts to soothe her, the little girl eventually burst into tears. "Damn it!" The robber glared fiercely at the mother and daughter. "I'm sorry." As the mother spoke, an elderly woman approached the child. She spoke to the little girl in a gentle voice, making eye contact. There, it's okay." She then took a pair of gloves out of her apron pocket. The child stopped crying momentarily as she was spoken to. The elderly woman quickly turned the gloves into a puppet, capturing the child's interest. "Hello, what's your name? How old are you? You're so cute." The puppet talked as the woman moved her fingers. The girl, fascinated, stopped crying. The woman continued to speak to her gently. Soon, the girl began smiling and touching the glove puppet. The woman handed her the gloves, which she played with, pulling and inserting her fingers. Her mood greatly improved, no longer crying but quite happy. Seeing this, the woman said to the mother, "I used to be a daycare worker. I love children. She's adorable." The mother nodded in relief. Then, another elderly woman began to comfort the mother. "You're pregnant, aren't you? Are you okay?" she asked. The mother nodded slightly. I was curious how she knew. The mother's belly wasn't visibly swollen, and at first glance, she didn't look pregnant. But she was rubbing her stomach unintentionally. The woman had noticed that action and spoken up. The elderly woman surrounded the mother and child protectively. "This is no good place. It's not good for the baby to have stress," she murmured, glaring silently at the robbers in condemnation. The other customers joined in, casting cold stares at the robbers. Even the robbers seemed to feel a sting in their conscience under the silent reproach. I looked around the area. Could there be something here that could help resolve this situation? Then I noticed a cane, presumably brought by someone, lying a short distance away. It might be useful. I gently tapped a nearby elderly man. I discreetly pointed at the cane, making sure not to alert the perpetrator, towards the elderly man who turned to us and slightly tilted his head. Upon seeing that, the man turned towards us and nodded slightly. Then, he nudged another elderly man in the same manner. Having grasped the situation, he too turned towards us, grinning and nodding. At that moment, my wife Sarah suddenly stood up. "What do you want, old woman?" Startled by my wife's sudden action, the leader of the robbers yelled out. Unfazed by this, my wife stepped forward towards the robbers. "I am the president of this bank," my wife declared loudly and clearly. With a resolute stride, she handed her business card to the robber. "Isn't one hostage enough? Just me alone," my wife asserted. "Don't be ridiculous. Shut up," the robber retorted loudly, refusing to give in. But my wife continued embittered. "Please release the others. There is a small child and a pregnant woman here. Some people are in poor health." If we get hurt or worse, it will only add to your crimes, she reasoned. The robbers were at a loss for words, confronted with my wife's valid argument. Boss, what do we do now? The henchmen looked to their leader for guidance, who seemed quite shaken. He appeared to be pondering the best course of action. Maybe we can keep this old woman as a hostage, but what if the cops come in while we're letting others go? It'll make our crimes worse. The robbers voiced their individual concerns. Amidst their chaos, the hostages remained silent, observing. But it was the leader who broke the disorder. Quiet, he barked at his underlings. His forcefulness brought an eerie silence to the room. Listen, if we don't get caught, it doesn't matter what crimes we commit. His irrational argument somehow unified the robbers' scattered thoughts. Now's my chance. The robbers, preoccupied with themselves, weren't paying attention to us. Seizing the moment, I, along with another elderly man wielding a cane, moved behind the robbers. What the? Surprised by our sudden movement, I didn't hesitate to twist the leader's arm. Ouch, stop it. I applied more pressure, pinning him down with my full weight. Now, he couldn't move. While the other robbers were stunned, the elderly man with the cane knocked their weapons away. Another elderly man kicked one of the robbers. The fragility of a group crime became apparent once their coordination faltered. Suddenly, the roles of hostages and criminals reversed. We successfully subdued the robbers. Almost simultaneously, police officers burst into the bank. Over here. The criminals are here. Apparently, someone had secretly contacted the police during our scuffle. An elderly woman, formerly a hostage, guided the police to us. As the police arrived, I released the robber and handed them over to the officers. Relieved that all the robbers was arrested without our injuries, I let out a sigh. That's when I locked eyes with the commanding officer. He quickly approached me. James, well done. We appreciate your help. He thanked me. Recognizing his familiar face, I couldn't help but smile. No wonder, he was Ethan, my direct subordinate. Or more accurately, former subordinate. Before retiring, I was a dedicated detective, and Ethan was one of my most trusted colleagues, always there to support me. As I was briefly explaining the incident, the bank employee Ryan hurried over. He said, James, you're incredible. I deeply regret my behavior and have been reflecting on it. His rapid speech and bright eyes conveyed his admiration. No, it was because everyone bravely stood up to them, I responded. Yes, that's true. Everyone was amazing. I couldn't do anything, Ryan said, seemingly downcast. Seeing this, Ethan chuckled a bit. The people in this area are also spirited, especially the elderly. It's reassuring for us and the police, he remarked. Indeed, the locals here are very energetic. The two men who helped me subdue the robbers were masters of martial arts. Since retiring, I often saw them volunteering at crime prevention workshops and neighborhood patrols. Even in my view, they were as physically fit as young people. And my wife Sarah, she's skilled in self-defense. She was confident she could handle the situation even if the robber attacked. To me, as her husband, this confidence is a bit worrying, but she is a president, a woman with many responsibilities. She's undoubtedly strong in both body and mind. Oh, right. Ethan suddenly said. Michael, he's quite capable too. He quickly contacted the police and then pretended to be scared to buy time. Thanks to him, we could arrive before any casualties occurred, he explained. Indeed, Michael, who kept yelping in fear with Zeke, was actually a strategist all along. I was impressed. The bank staff must be well trained to act so promptly in such situations. It's commendable for a corporation, Ethan remarked, smiling gently. Hearing the bank being praised felt like a compliment to Sarah, the president. Ryan thought of the elderly in this town, reminding him of his grandparents. Both are quite old and frail. That's why he had a strong feeling that he needs to protect the elderly. It was the same with telephone scam. He wanted to prevent it at all costs. However, today's events were an eye-opener. These people were all full of life, and Ryan, who had been paralyzed with fear, ended up being the one protected. The reality of the situation and his own inability to do anything. He felt a sort of shock at these revelations. Seeing his demeanor, I spoke to him. "We all want to stay healthy, but we never know what might happen to us," I said. Ryan started to respond, "That's not true. Sadly, that's the reality. Tomorrow, we might be bedridden. That's why we should think and act as much as we can while we can," I advised. "That's true," Ryan replied. "Your desire to protect is admirable and appreciated, but don't view the elderly through a lens of age. Of course, there are those who genuinely need help, so it's best to offer assistance after understanding each person's situation," I suggested. Hearing this, Ryan realized that not all elderly are the same. It might have been a mistake to think of them as weak and in need of protection. Just like some elderly are energetic, there are young people who may be pregnant or have small children. Many have invisible ailments. I feel like Ryan had overlooked that fact. Ryan felt like scales had fallen from his eyes. "Be kind and gentle to everyone, not just the elderly," Ryan murmured. Saying it aloud, it felt like a new motto had taken root in him. A sense of purpose and motivation began to rise within him. Ryan regained his original sparkle in his eyes. And so, the criminals were arrested and transported by the police. Finally, a sigh of relief. Today was truly eventful. As I heaved a sigh of relief, remembering the day's turmoil, I recalled our original purpose for visiting the bank. We hadn't yet withdrawn the money. Recently, my eldest daughter built a new house. And my eldest son's wife gave birth. There's also a grandchild's school entrance celebration. One expense after another, that's why we came here. Celebrations like these really require cash, my wife commented, looking troubled. Then Michael appeared, smoothing out his suit. With a gentle smile, he said, "Sorry for the delay. How can I assist you now?" After completing the celebrations for our children and grandchildren, our lives returned to peaceful normalcy. Spring is here. It's been quite warm lately, perfect for planting vegetable seedlings. Tomatoes, cucumbers, eggplants, ideal for summer vegetables. However, I remember last year's mistake. Last year, I miscalculated the amount to plant. As a result, I ended up harvesting a large quantity of cucumbers, even adding them to chicken soup. This year, I must be careful not to repeat that. But if there's an excess again, selling them as $1 vegetables might be an option. That sounds fun in its own way. Given that I'm controlling the planting amount, there might be some extra space in the garden. If there is, I'd like to plant sunflower seeds, my wife's favorite. I'm sure she'll be delighted. So, I start planning for the days ahead. As I do, the prospect of summer becomes increasingly exciting. Ping, ping. My phone chirped cheerfully on the desk. It was a notification for likes on a recent post. Lately, I've been into posting updates about my garden on social media. The likes came from my elderly neighbors. Like me, they're also curious and enjoy trying new things. We relish our days, filled with new discoveries in our later years. I want to stay that way too. I want to stay active and vibrant, even as I age. I aim to continue being helpful within my capabilities. I'm still in my prime, with plenty of dreams, hopes, and things to enjoy. Intending to walk a wonderful second life, hand in hand with my family and community. And with that thought, I resolve to live each day with enthusiasm. Staying with you any longer doesn't benefit our marriage. I've always been alone, raising our child by myself." Saying this, my wife took our high school daughter and left. What I was left with was the mortgage of a luxurious high-rise condo and the large furniture we bought when we first got married. I looked around the empty room and felt utterly hopeless, all alone. I'm George, 45 years old. After graduating from college, I struggled and finally passed the bar exam on my 4th attempt. I joined a law firm after completing my legal training. I went through the grind of being a freelance lawyer, working late nights and weekends as a matter of course. When I was a newly minted lawyer, I married Lily, a go-getter career woman. Even after getting married, we were both consumed by our work, but a few years later, we were blessed with a daughter, Julie. I wanted to help Lily, who was struggling with parenting, but I was hardly ever there to support her. Not only was I busy with study groups on weekends, but I also had to attend golf and other business entertaining events. Moreover, both Lily and I had families far away, so we had no one to rely on for childcare. Thus, Lily handled almost everything from daycare drop-offs to household chores, and I remained involved in parenting for over a decade. I opened my own law firm to increase my control over my time and tried to repair our strained marriage. Though I was still busy, being my own boss allowed me to avoid late nights and made it easier to take weekends off. I wanted to make up for our past misconnections. I desperately tried to help Lily with household chores and spend more time with Julie, putting in a commendable effort. But it might have been too late. Whenever I was home, I felt their cold stares. Julie, having graduated middle school, didn't need me anymore. One evening, "Can we talk? I have something important to discuss." Sitting across from Lily, I was unaware of her true intentions. As Julie is starting high school, I want a divorce. I can live on my own and support Julie. There's no need for us to live together as a family of 3. Once Julie is independent, I can't envision spending our later years together, so it's better we start our separate lives as soon as possible. Lily explained this matter-of-factly. I was stunned by her sudden proposal and couldn't think straight. But I've tried my hardest, setting up my own firm to create time for us. We don't need to talk about divorce. There's still a chance to fix things. With my income, you don't have to work so hard. I tried my best to persuade her, but Lily's expression darkened. I've always hated that mindset of yours. I don't want to be provided for. I want to live as equals. I can never forgive you for turning your back on the family when it was hardest. I want to live freely with Julie from now on. As she said this, she placed the divorce papers in front of me. Not only had she completed her part, but she had also already signed them. I was speechless. That moment, I remembered Lily was a fierce career woman before we got married. It was too late. Everything was far too late. Upon divorce, we proceeded with discussions on property division, custody, and child support. I never imagined my profession as a lawyer would be useful in such a situation. Once all the procedures were completed, Lily and Julie left the house. Their backs, not once looking back, showed no signs of lingering attachment. The divorce shattered the life plan I had envisioned. If I was to live alone, there was no need to work so hard anymore. Decades of lonely days lay ahead. I kept working, but I had lost all purpose in life, mechanically commuting between my office and my empty condo. Good morning. It's been 5 years since I started my own law firm. I go to the office at the same time every morning. Fortunately, I have a stable client base from my previous firm. There are 2 women who handle the office work. One is Elizabeth, in her 40s, a veteran in administrative skills. The other is a calm and beautiful woman in her late 20s, named Jessica, who has been an office clerk for only half a year. I've been asking them to focus on accounting tasks, but recently, something has been bothering me. There's a tense relationship between the 2 female employees, with Elizabeth the senior, being particularly harsh toward Jessica. Unlike other employees who are often out, they work facing each other every day, making the atmosphere in the office quite evident. Since Elizabeth is in a higher position and more experienced, Jessica often ends up being criticized and becomes timid. Before I knew it, Jessica was becoming more withdrawn, afraid of getting scolded, and lost her liveliness. It wasn't like Elizabeth to be so mean, so I wondered what had happened. Both being women, the situation needs to be handled delicately. I'll listen to both sides separately to understand each of their stories. Then I'll decide how to proceed based on what I learn. Thinking this, I asked Jessica to run an errand to the post office, then took the opportunity to talk to Elizabeth. Lately, I've noticed you two aren't communicating well. Is everything okay? Did something happen? Elizabeth started venting as if she had been waiting for this moment. George, you have to hear this. Jessica's paperwork is full of errors. She apologizes but keeps repeating the same mistakes. I don't want to be angry, but she doesn't consider my feelings. Do you know how many times I've had to correct her work? I hurriedly calmed her down, saying, "Just calm down." Apparently, she reached her limit with Jessica's continuous mistakes at work. Jessica is a calm and beautiful woman in her late 20s. She's not only good-natured but also stylish, and she's well-liked by male colleagues and clients. Sitting across from her and being constantly reminded of their different treatments, Elizabeth might not find it amusing. Though she didn't say it outright, it was clear that there were reasons beyond work that aggravated Elizabeth. I had been concerned about their relationship for some time but had struggled to take action. If I sided with Elizabeth, Jessica might feel cornered and quit, but if I supported Jessica, Elizabeth's behavior might worsen. I thought about calming Elizabeth while teaching Jessica how not to trigger her, and considered rearranging their seats to minimize interference. That seemed like the best I could do right now. Dealing with women can be complicated and troublesome. Suggesting that we just go out for drinks and let bygones be bygones would likely be dismissed as insensitive. Worse, they both might start seeing me as an adversary. All I wanted was for them to continue working peacefully, without having to put in extra effort. I sighed, oh boy, holding my head in frustration, cursing my own immaturity for not being able to resolve this despite being a lawyer. Then one day, on my way back from a client visit, I spotted Jessica sitting alone on a park bench, looking downcast. Seeing this as an opportunity to discuss her issues with Elizabeth, I approached her gently. Tired, huh? Taking a break? George, sorry to bother you, but I've been concerned because you've seemed down lately. When Jessica turned to face me, she awkwardly averted her eyes. I'm sorry, She suddenly looked up, struggling to find words, and tears began to overflow from her large eyes. This was bad. As a lawyer, I'm used to dealing with tears, but this situation in a park during broad daylight was highly problematic. I quickly offered her a handkerchief and sat beside her, gently calming her down. Although I felt uncomfortable being watched by curious onlookers, I decided to patiently wait until she regained her composure. Despite the discomfort of being watched, I went to buy a cup of coffee from a nearby cafe. Holding the coffee I handed her, she cried for a while but eventually managed to whisper a faint sorry. Are you okay? Did something happen? Jessica, if you'd like, I'm here to listen. Talking about it might help you feel better. I handed the coffee for her. Jessica quietly said thank you and began to speak in bits and pieces. Actually, I had a fiancé, and we were planning to marry next year, but he cheated on me with another woman, and she got pregnant. I had no choice but to step back, and I'm just shocked. Internally surprised, I maintained my composure and nodded, saying I see. I can't sleep alone at home. It's too unsettling. Even though I've been taking medication prescribed by a doctor, the side effects make me space out, and now I'm constantly messing up at work. I feel terrible for causing trouble at the office, even though I'm trying to be careful. Listening to her tearful confession, I finally understood her situation. But the roots of the problem to be solved run deep. Above all, she needs to recover on her own, and there's only so much I can do to help. Take your time to rest and recover. If you don't want to be alone at home, maybe consider going back to your family home for a while. Relying too much on medication isn't good either. It's important to rest both your mind and body. I genuinely tried to offer my support. Thank you, I appreciate it, but I can't go back home. The news about my broken engagement has already spread, and I'm not in a position to return, especially after sending out all the wedding invitations. She was in a situation with no easy way out. I pondered deeply with my hands clasped. I see. Well, give me some time, okay? I'll try to think of something too. Standing up, I saw her looking at me, slightly bewildered. For now, don't dwell on things too much. If being at work helps distract you from your pain, then keep coming in as usual. Until you feel better, I'll assign you different tasks, so you don't have to worry about making mistakes. I'll head back to the office first and let everyone know that I've assigned you to different field work. So take your time and come back when you're ready. After saying this, I headed back to the office without waiting for her response. The next day, I rearranged the office setup. Coincidentally, our contracted cleaning service was scheduled for the weekend. Explaining it as a redecoration in anticipation of their visit, no one questioned the change. I moved Elizabeth's seat away from Jessica and assigned Jessica different tasks. These included organizing office supplies, managing clients, and overseeing compliance with employee overtime and paid leave. Unlike her original accounting role, these tasks wouldn't lead to critical errors, and I would be the final checker, which eased the burden. Assigning a male colleague to assist Elizabeth as her support would likely improve her mood. The male staff, involved in their work's financial aspects, gained new insights and ways of working. It was a general release of tension for everyone. This approach unexpectedly improved the workplace environment significantly within a month. I approached Jessica, who seemed much calmer and more energetic. "Hi, George. Sorry to bother you, but could you take a look at this?" Handing her the documents, I watched as Jessica's eyes widened in surprise. It was a document I had compiled during my spare time, detailing how to claim damages from her former fiancé for breach of engagement. In cases like hers, where the fiance cheats and calls off the engagement, it's possible to claim damages. I know money isn't the solution, and it's not about the money, but you shouldn't have to suffer in silence. And it's legally recognized to claim for the emotional pain you've endured. Jessica stared intently at the documents, frozen. It's up to you to decide what to do. As a lawyer, I'm just showing you an option. If you decide to take action, I'm here to help. I'll assign an employee from my firm who specializes in divorce and women's issues to handle your case. I spoke kindly but firmly. Jessica softly thanked me and said, "Please give me some time to think," before leaving. As I told her, I was fine with whatever she decided. If it could be a source of strength for her and help her move forward, that's all that mattered. Feeling a sense of closure, I returned to my remaining work. A few days later, I faced a dilemma. Suddenly feeling dizzy at the office, I nearly fainted. The diagnosis was anemia due to fatigue, and I had to be hospitalized for tests, forcing me to take almost a week off work. Now convalescing at home, the vast condo seemed excessive, with empty containers of fast food meals and ready meals littering the space. How many years had it been since my wife and daughter left? I had been working nonstop to forget my loneliness and maintain my lifestyle, but perhaps now the bill was coming due. Though I tried my best, the reality that my family wouldn't return hit me anew. My initial hope that they would always be able to come back ended up being nothing but wishful thinking. Living in such a luxurious place didn't make my everyday life any different from the impoverished days in my cheap college apartment. In fact, now back from the hospital, I struggled with what to eat. Maybe it's time to move out and find a more comfortable place to live. Alone in my room, where no one could hear me, I muttered to myself about how this house no longer felt like mine. Just then, who could it be? Peering at the camera monitor, I saw Jessica standing there. For a moment, I doubted my eyes, wondering if I was mistaken, but there was no doubt about it. It was Jessica. "George, good evening. I'm sorry to bother you while you were off, but I brought some urgent documents to deliver directly to you." Taken aback by this unexpected visit, I composed myself and unlocked the elevator hall. But then I realized the appalling state of my apartment. This is bad. But Jessica was already on her way up in the elevator. As I frantically began cleaning up, throwing trash into garbage bags, the doorbell rang again. "Welcome, I'm sorry you had to come all this way." Sending her away at the door with a simple "that's all," then, would be extremely rude, no matter the circumstances. Realizing too late that I was still in my pajamas, I cursed my own lack of foresight. "Are you okay? I heard you suddenly collapsed and was really worried," Jessica said, peering at my face with concern, seemingly unfazed by my appearance. I repeated, "I'm fine," and let her in. There was nothing more I could do. I had no choice but to resign myself to the situation. And as expected, she froze in the living room filled with garbage bags. Haha, actually, I divorced a few years ago and my wife took our daughter with her. I always relied on my wife for household chores. So I'm clueless about cooking and cleaning, ending up in the hospital due to unhealthy living. That's not what a manager, let alone an entrepreneur, should be like. I rambled on, too embarrassed to make eye contact. "George, I understand your situation, but it's not good to be in this environment, especially when you're recovering. I'll help. Let's clean up and ventilate the room." I was at a loss for words. As soon as I understood her intent, I was hit with an impulse to protest. "Absolutely not," and hastily stopped Jessica, as she was already reaching for a garbage bag to start cleaning. "It's okay, really. I can clean up. Just sit somewhere comfortable." I took the garbage bags from Jessica and began cleaning efficiently. She watched me move briskly, a puzzled look on her face. "I'll go to the supermarket across the street and get some groceries. I'll ring the intercom when I'm back, so please open the door." Once again, I was baffled by her words. But when I turned around, she was already heading out the door. What's going on here? Wait, I should give her some money. But she had already left. I hurried to finish cleaning up before she returned, overwhelmed by the situation. I couldn't keep up with the emotions brought on by the unfolding situation. I felt pathetic for being constantly outmaneuvered and overwhelmed by the events. And I was surprised at how much I was shaken by the presence of her. "I'll use your kitchen, if that's okay." Jessica returned with bags full of groceries and began cooking skillfully in the kitchen. I hadn't heard such rhythmic chopping in a long time. She had been living alone for a while, cooking for herself every day. It was a side of her I hadn't seen at the office. "Here you go, chicken soup. It's gentle on a weak stomach and warming. Please eat." Before my admiring eyes, a steaming bowl of soup was served. The chopped onions and soup made it incredibly appetizing. How long had it been since I had such a meal? I thanked Jessica with a satisfied smile and tasted it. Delicious, truly delicious. For the first time in a long while, I felt a meal spread warmth throughout my body. Jessica watched me eat with pleasure. Feeling awkward, I gently set down my spoon. "Thank you so much for today. You've been a great help. I should head back to the office, though. I don't want to keep you here too late." I honestly expressed my feelings of gratitude and apology. "Previously, you talked to me about claiming damages, right? Today's visit is just a small token of my appreciation for that." I was about to dismiss her gratitude with a no, it's nothing, but she continued. "After giving it some thought, I decided not to pursue the lawsuit, but it's not about letting him get away with it. I've come to terms with the past as just that, the past, and I'm able to look forward now. In fact, I'm relieved that I realized all this before getting married. I don't want to waste my current time on a man from my past. Your support back then helped me find closure and the strength to start over in life." I started to say that's, but was at a loss for words. "I see you, George, not just as a boss, but also as a reliable and wonderful manual. I'm serious about this, and if you ever need me, don't hesitate to call me. I'll be there." Her words, which could be taken as a confession, left me speechless. Seeing my reaction, Jessica too seemed to realize what she had said and blushed. "Thank you." That was all I managed to say, and Jessica smiled warmly. "Please take care of yourself and come back to the office soon." As she said this and I tried to see her off, she gently pushed me back inside the doorway. "It's fine here." With no chance to argue, she began to close the door as I thanked her again. I meant what I said earlier. Right before closing the door, she peeked out and added those words. I stood at the door, my heart racing, unable to calm down. Her face lingered in my mind, filling me with an overwhelming sense of happiness. My name's Mike. My past isn't something I'm particularly proud of. When I was little, my parents divorced, and I was raised by my mom, single-parented. In middle school, I wasn't exactly well-behaved. I'd hang out with my friends and get picked up by the local police, and my mom was constantly being called to the school. I was what you'd call a rebel. I hardly studied, and I didn't even bother with high school entrance exams. Why bother with school when it's not mandatory, I thought, and chose to drop out despite everyone's objections. I didn't think I was doing anything wrong, but it took my mom collapsing to realize that even thinking that was a mistake. "Mom, are you okay?" Maybe it was the years of stress. She worked from dawn till dusk to make ends meet, and it seemed like the physical and mental strain had finally broken her down. I called an ambulance in a panic and rode with her. The doctor said she was lucky a few days in the hospital would do. What an idiot I've been. I regretted it so much then. Not pursuing further education or a job, just goofing around. I was such a fool. I couldn't stop crying as I watched my mom sleep in her hospital bed. The next day, I went to visit her. When I opened the door to her room, she looked at me and smiled. "You came to see me." "Mom, I'm so sorry for all the trouble I've caused you." "What are you talking about? I don't feel troubled at all. I just want you to be happy and healthy." Seeing her smile, I knew I had to make it up to her somehow. I started job hunting right away, attending numerous interviews day after day. But the world isn't so forgiving. Everywhere I went, they asked about my education. Man, being only a middle school graduate is such a disadvantage. I was close to giving up when I couldn't land a job. Then, I saw a help wanted sign at a local cake shop and decided to give it a shot. It was the shop where I used to go with my mom to buy cakes when I was a kid. The owner, Jack, whom I hadn't seen in a while, greeted me with a smile. "Wow, Mike, you've grown so much. Mike, can you start tomorrow?" "What? Aren't we going to have an interview?" I was surprised, and Jack just laughed. "All right then, let's confirm. Are you ready to make cakes with me?" Yes, I am." "Great, then let's shake on it." Jack extended his hand with a smile. "Thank you." I was taken aback but firmly shook his hand. That's when I swore to myself to give it my all. Later, under Jack's guidance, I started learning how to make cakes. Carrying ingredients, whipping up loads of cream. I was initially surprised at how tough the behind-the-scenes work was. "You have a good knack for this, you'll make a fine pastry chef." Those words from Jack made me even more determined. I worked till I was exhausted every day, even practicing cake making at home. I think I studied harder than ever before in my life. Surprisingly, I liked this job. There was a lot to learn, but it didn't feel hard at all. It was the first time learning felt so fun. My mom, who had been discharged from the hospital, was quietly cheering me on. A few months later, Jack called me in for a talk, and I entered the back room nervously. "You're a fast learner and a joy to teach. How about aiming for the next step? Our cake shop's work isn't just store operations. We have a partnership with a nearby wedding venue, providing cakes for weddings. How about taking on that challenge?" "Yes, I'd be thrilled to. Thank you for the opportunity." I gratefully accepted the offer. When I told my mom, she was really happy. "You've worked hard, it'll be fine. I'm rooting for you." The next day, I headed to the wedding venue right away. It seemed to be a well-known place. I'll be working with them now. I need to make a good first impression. I knocked on the kitchen door nervously. Inside, there was a guy about my age. Maybe he's a pastry chef. "Nice to meet you. I'm starting here today. My name's Mike. Looking forward to working with you." I greeted him energetically, believing first impressions are key, but he just glanced sideways and responded nonchalantly, "Yeah, sure. Nice to meet you." As I stood there puzzled by his casual response, a man named James, who turned out to be the manager, came in. "Good morning. You must be Mike. I'm looking forward to working with you." Afterward, I received a brief overview of the venue and greeted the other staff. James said, "If you have any questions, feel free to ask." So during lunch, I immediately inquired about the man from earlier. "That's Keith, the head pastry chef here. He trained abroad and has won several competitions. He's really an incredible pastry chef." "Indeed, that's impressive. An elite craftsman." I was happy to have a skilled senior, but returning from lunch, Keith glanced at me. That look, I felt unwelcome. Unfortunately, my suspicion seemed correct, as once the work started, I was mostly given menial tasks. "Hey, whip up the cream. Even a small-town cake shop can do that much, right? Just slice the fruit for now. Simple, right? I'll do the decorative cuts. Don't do anything unnecessary. We're different from those basic small-town cake shops." He spoke in a curt manner, looking down on me. Eventually, I was even stuck with the dishwashing. When I tried to help out, thinking ahead, I ended up getting scolded. Maybe it's understandable, given he's a world-trained head pastry chef and I'm just a self-taught pastry chef from a small-town shop. But I've been trained by Jack. I wanted to do more. Even though I thought that, I couldn't say anything, and it felt wrong, especially since the other staff were so nice. James noticed and cared, but I didn't want to cause any unnecessary worry. For Jack, who trusted me with this job, I had no choice but to work my hardest. Then one day, a new couple came to the venue. I just happened to run into them in front of the building when I was returning from an errand. As I greeted them and was about to leave, the woman called out, "Wait, are you Mike?" "Excuse me." I turned around in surprise, and she looked just as astonished. "Yep, it's you, Mike. Do you remember me? We were in the same middle school class. I'm Mandy," she said, smiling. I recognized that smile. In middle school, while other classmates avoided me because I was scary, Mandy was one of the few who treated me normally. She'd scold me sometimes, but always talk to me with a smile. For me, who didn't enjoy school, her smile was a rare comfort. Mandy, who I saw after so long, had become a beautiful lady. "I remember you. It's been a while." "It sure has. Do you work here? You seem to have grown up a lot." "Well, a lot has happened, and you're here because..." I glanced at the man standing next to her. A slightly older, calm-looking man politely nodded. "Yes, we're getting married. We came to look at venues, but if you work here, maybe this is the place for us." "I'm flattered, but make sure you look around first. It's a big decision, after all." "I know. Well, we can't really take our time looking around," Mandy said as she touched her growing belly. "So that's what it is. Congratulations." "Thank you. Well then, we'll go and check it out," she said and waved goodbye, walking in with her husband. The two of them looked truly happy. It made me feel joyous too. I hope they decide to have their wedding here. It would give me the motivation to work even harder. Thinking this, I headed back to the kitchen, where Keith and James were talking. What? Turn down that kind of customer, please. That's not really an option. Why should I, of all people, accept such a low-budget job? It's ridiculous. People who can afford more shouldn't even be getting married. It seemed they were arguing about Mandy's wedding. Her family apparently wasn't very well off. With her pregnancy and the desire for a modest ceremony with just close family, they really wanted to stick to a low-budget plan. Keith, we do have low-budget options in our plans, right? The client isn't asking for anything unreasonable. It's not something to be turned down. I don't want to do such cheap work, Keith insisted, arms crossed. James looked troubled, his shoulders drooping. Hearing this, I couldn't help to ask, this might be my chance. Could I take on that job? Both of them looked at me, wide-eyed, but Keith quickly frowned. Don't be ridiculous. You couldn't possibly make a wedding cake. I've made large decorative cakes before, and I've learned a lot from Keith here. I may not have any awards, but that's why I can work on a budget without feeling bad. Please let me do it. I promise to give it my all. No way. Absolutely not. I won't let a small-town cake shop like yours tarnish this venue's reputation. But Keith, you don't want to do it, right? I do. I'll take full responsibility. Really, we should just turn down such low-budget clients. I can't just let that comment go. James suddenly raised his voice. Both of us were surprised. It was a tone we never expected from the usually mild-mannered him. This venue should be accessible to all couples wishing to marry. I want every couple to feel happy here. Keith was taken aback by his determination. Then James firmly grasped my hand. Mike, please, I'm counting on you. Let's work together to make it a great ceremony. Yes, Keith grumbled discontentedly, but I was entrusted with making the wedding cake. Since then, I spent every night researching, striving to meet all their requests while considering the budget. Jack lent me the kitchen for practice and supported me as much as he could, even amidst his busy schedule. After numerous trials, I created what I believe to be the best cake ever, pouring all my gratitude towards Mandy into it. Wow, this is looking great. Jack's approval boosted my confidence, and I couldn't wait for the big day. On the day of the wedding, the kitchen was bustling, but I carefully and lovingly prepared the cake. Keith remained holed up in his office. He was still adamant about not helping with a low-budget ceremony. I never thought he'd be that kind of person. James shook his head in disbelief. The ceremony went smoothly, and the reception was just as flawless. Mandy, smiling happily in her wedding dress next to her husband, looked incredibly beautiful. The intimate setting made for a warm and friendly atmosphere. As my turn approached, I grew increasingly nervous. And now, the entrance of the wedding cake. With the master of ceremonies announcement, I carried the cake to the bride and groom. The cake sparkled under the spotlights, eliciting a chorus of wows from the audience. I decorated it with numerous sugar confections of characters from a theme park the couple loved, and arranged edible flowers and cream to resemble a flower field. The cake was surrounded by ribbons made of chocolate and candy crafts. The sugar confections were a labor of love. Wow, it's cute. I could hear cheerful voices from around the room. The bride and groom were also surprised by the cake. What a lovely cake, thank you. You're truly a skilled pastry chef, she said, tears in her eyes. Thank you, it's so beautiful. The groom smiled. Guests eagerly came to take pictures of the cake. The cake-cutting ceremony was a big success. Though the groom looked a bit overwhelmed when he got a mouthful of sugar confections along with the cake. Returning to the kitchen, I was greeted with a round of applause from James and the other staff. Amazing job, Mike. Everyone really liked it. Thank you. It's all thanks to your help, James. James and I exchanged a firm handshake, feeling an unprecedented sense of accomplishment. I was so glad to see everyone happy. Later, 2 letters arrived at the venue. One was a thank you letter from Mandy. The wedding was a memorable experience, especially the cake. I want to thank all the staff who put together such a wonderful ceremony, and the pastry chef who made the cake. The other letter was from the boss of the groom who attended the wedding. He was impressed by the cake and showed it to his daughter who was planning her wedding. She wanted the same cake for her wedding. I want the best cake for my daughter, the letter stated, an outright offer. Mike, you did it. James was even more excited than I was. See, I told you had a knack for this, Jack said, seemingly proud when I told him. After that, word seemed to spread, and I started receiving a lot of wedding cake requests. Eventually, I was trusted with making all the cakes for the venue, and Keith had left before I realized it. I heard later that his overbearing attitude had made him unpopular among the staff, and everyone was relieved when he finally left. James seems to have been promoted since then. He's in a commanding position in the office, but he still wants to be involved in the field even after his promotion. So the subordinates are having a tough time. The new manager was grumbling a bit in the kitchen. As for me, I received an offer saying, "We'd love for you to become the exclusive pastry chef in place of Keith," but I chose the path of the small-town cake shop. I enjoyed working at the venue, but I wanted to keep working with Jack, who had nurtured me. I also wanted to give back to Jack, who had always supported me behind the scenes. James was a bit disappointed, but he smiled and accepted my decision, respecting the path I had chosen. "Are you sure about this, Mike? You could have stayed working at the wedding venue permanently." Jack said it was a waste, but his wife told me he's actually really happy about it. Now, I am applying the skills and knowledge I gained at the venue to create new cakes, and they are well received by customers. And with the earnings, I gifted my mom a vacation. Seeing her son succeed in his work, she was very happy. "You were such a rascal, but you've grown up to be such a fine young man. I'm so proud," she said with tears in her eyes. It was a heartwarming moment for me as well. Later, Mandy became a regular customer, often coming to buy cakes with her family. "I'm counting on you for my daughter's wedding cake too." As she said this, she cradled a little girl in her arms. A few months after the wedding, a lively little girl was born. I smiled back warmly as her small eyes gazed at me. Of course, I'd be delighted. Life is what you make of it, and you can always start over, no matter what happens. That's what I've come to realize from my own experience. "All right, John, I'm counting on you," said the head of HR, Michael, patting my shoulder. In front of me was one of this year's new hires, a male employee who is also the son of our company's president. "My name's Alex. Nice to meet you." He glared at me with a fierce look in his eyes. "Nice to meet you. I'm the supervisor, John. If you have any questions, feel free to ask." I did my best to be pleasant and accommodating. Our company is a family-run business with a hereditary system. This means he's going to be the next president. He's been assigned to the operations planning department for training, and he's under my supervision. To be honest, he looks a bit like a tough guy, like he's straight out of a gang. But being the president's son, he must have received a good education. That's what I thought. My name is John. I'm the supervisor of the store planning section in the operations planning department of a food company. My job mainly involves planning new restaurant openings and campaigns for our chain stores. I immediately showed Alex to his desk and started teaching him how things work. But the problem was that he was incredibly incompetent. First of all, he had no motivation and lacked focus. He couldn't read difficult words, nor could he use a computer. He was unaware of general knowledge and manners. He was unfriendly, had poor memory, and didn't listen to others. He didn't reflect on his mistakes and kept repeating the same ones. I never imagined he would be this incapable. And he's supposed to be the next president. Training him was extremely challenging. However, I couldn't scold him harshly, no matter how bad of a subordinate he was. After all, he's the president's son. If I upset him, he might complain to the president, and I could get fired. Every day, I walked on eggshells around him, and everyone in the department was careful around him. Then, something happened with Alex. He made an unbelievable mistake. I'm not even sure if it can be called a mistake, but he shared information about our company's new restaurant opening on his personal social media account. It wasn't something that could be brushed off as a careless act. As a result, a rival company in the same industry got ahead of us. Moreover, their store seemed more upscale but had lower prices. Because of that, our new store's sales went to the rival. I thought I had hammered home the importance of confidential information management during the new employee training. "Hey Alex, can we talk? Do you have some time?" I informed him of the situation, gave him a warning, and urged him to reflect on his actions. But he nonchalantly said, "Oh really? That's just bad luck." Then I had to restrain myself from grabbing him by the collar as anger rushed to my head. "Everyone has been working hard every day, even doing overtime to prepare for this, and your careless action has ruined it all," I said as calmly as I could, but Alex looked dissatisfied. "Come on. Who would think that many people would see a regular employee's personal social media account? I mostly have friends as followers. Honestly, I'm more surprised that so many people saw it." Looking at him pouting like a child, I was utterly exasperated. "What are you talking about? The internet is accessible to people all over the world. You can't complain about who sees it once it's out there. You're a professional now. Please act more responsibly as an employee of our company." I spoke slowly, trying to make him understand. Alex then made a bored face and replied in a drawn-out voice, "Yo, okay. What's with that attitude?" I felt completely disrespected as a supervisor. The next day, as soon as I got to the office, Michael called me in. "John, are you bullying Alex at work?" Michael accused me, but I had no idea what he was talking about. "What do you mean? I haven't been bullying him. However, Alex says that he became depressed after you scolded him harshly and insulted him in front of other employees." "What? I never insulted him. I just gave him a warning." But no matter what I said, it was useless. "Alex is threatening to sue you in court," Michael continued. "What? A lawsuit?" "Yes, that's right. However, he's willing to drop the case if you voluntarily resign." "That's absurd. I don't want to resign, especially when I haven't done anything wrong, but that's what he's saying. If you lose in court, you might have to pay him thousands of dollars in damages. Are you sure about this?" Hearing this, I fell silent. There was no fact of bullying and no evidence, so losing in court seemed impossible. But what if, by some fluke, I did lose? If it goes to court, I'll have to hire a lawyer. That will inevitably end up costing me money. Damn it. How did it come to this? Anyway, to resolve this amicably, the HR department suggests you should consider voluntary resignation. With Michael saying this, I felt I had no choice but to resign. It was as if I had been fired. In the end, I submitted my resignation and was set to leave the company at the end of the month. When I returned from HR, Alex was grinning at me. "That's what happens when someone gets cheeky with a future president like me." He said it loudly enough for me to hear, as if talking to himself. There was no point in responding, so I pretended not to hear. The 2 weeks until my resignation were hellish. Every day, Alex would constantly sneer at me, sometimes even hurling personal insults. I endured it all in silence. If I argued back, he might accuse me of bullying again. And knowing him, he might even write about it on social media. I decided it was best not to stir things up. As the days passed and my final day approached, "John, "Can I talk to you for a moment?" Catherine, my boss, approached me. Catherine is a famously beautiful woman in the company, a department head. I think she's about 32 years old, 2 years older than me. "Jess, what is it? How about we go for a drink tonight? Just the two of us. I can throw you a farewell party, but consider this a substitute. I'll pay for it," she offered. I had no plans, so I happily agreed. Though it was the first time I was going out for drinks alone with a superior from the same department, I was secretly thrilled. Catherine was quite my type. Her one-length long hair was softly curled at the ends, her eyelashes were long, and her eyes were wide and bright. She looked childlike when she laughed. I liked that about her. But I knew she had a boyfriend, so I always tried to restrain my feelings. Still, I wondered if it was okay for her to go out drinking alone with a man, even if she had a boyfriend. Wouldn't he be mad? Well, as long as nobody finds out. No, there's nothing going on. It's just a farewell party. With these thoughts swirling in my head, I finished up my work and left the office on time. When I arrived at the bar we had agreed to meet at, Catherine was already there. "John, you're early. Over here." She waved her hand to call me over. I walked to the back of the bar and sat down across from her at her table. "Catherine, sorry to keep you waiting. Tough day, huh?" "Indeed. What would you like to drink?" "I'll start with a beer, please." I ordered a beer, and we toasted together. A drink after work is just delightful. But really, Alex has been quite a handful. Catherine leaned in close to my ear, as if sharing a secret. She probably did so out of caution that someone from our company might be listening, but the closeness made my heart race. "Jess, I agree. John, you've had a rough time with him." As my direct supervisor, she knew the reason for my resignation. And since I was removed from being Alex's mentor, Catherine had been looking after him. She always talked to me about how much trouble Alex had been causing her. "That kid is shockingly incompetent at work, and he's so defiant too." I found myself nodding and agreeing with her a lot during our conversation. As we talked, the drinks flowed, and I could tell that Catherine was getting tipsy, her face turning red. "Really, that kid is such a problem. It's all because his dad spoiled him too much." I suddenly felt a sense of unease when she spoke about him as if he were her own family. "Wait, Catherine, did you just say that kid as in?" "Oh, I guess I never told you. Alex is actually my younger brother." "What?" I was shocked and asked again. "But your last names are different, aren't they?" "Yes, our parents divorced. I was taken by our mom, and Alex stayed with our dad. Dad's last name is Smith, and Mom's is Abbott." I couldn't hide my surprise at this unexpected revelation. I couldn't believe Catherine was the president's daughter. And that seemingly hopeless guy who resembled a delinquent was actually Catherine's brother. Catherine, perhaps fueled by the alcohol, continued talking more freely. She said their parents divorced when she was in high school and he was in first grade. Alex had always been a spoiled and study-hating child, defiant even towards their parents. Dad is out of his mind to think of making such a kid the next president just because he's his son, Catherine said, letting out a deep sigh. I tried to discipline him strictly, not spoiling him just because we're siblings, but he's still defiant towards me. Then, Catherine sighed deeply and added, "But you know, I can kind of understand how Alex feels. Their father, Mr. Smith, had always been solely focused on his work, neglecting his family. The children were both more attached to their mother. Then suddenly, he was separated from her. Young Alex must have felt very lonely. Mr. Smith never remarried and left household matters to a housekeeper. He was always too busy with work to attend Alex's school events like sports day or parent-teacher meetings. That's why he grew up so twisted. I can blame him entirely." Hearing her story, I felt a bit of sympathy for Alex. Of course, there are many people who grow up without a parent and still turn out fine. But Alex was different. Perhaps Alex's attitude at work is his way of getting back at Dad for not paying attention to him when he was young. Dad understands that, so he can scold Alex harshly. But it's not fair for you, John, to suffer because of it. That's just not right. So, John. Suddenly, she grabbed my hands with both of hers. Why don't we join forces and teach them both a lesson? What? And so, our strategy meeting continued until late into the night. The next day, on my supposed last day at work, Catherine and I stormed into the president's office. In her hand was a voice recorder. Recorded on it were Alex's verbal abuses towards me and Catherine. Catherine had been secretly recording since she became his mentor, planning to discuss his behavior with Mr. Smith someday. Hearing the recordings, Mr. Smith was shocked and fell silent for a while. This proves that John wasn't bullying Alex. If anything, it was John who was being bullied. Catherine and I explained to Mr. Smith about Alex's lack of motivation and his disrespectful attitude at work, detailing the actual situation in the office. We also reiterated the details of the incident involving Alex and social media, which had caused the company significant damage. Upon hearing this, Mr. Smith held his head, groaning in distress. I knew he was a troubled son, but I never imagined it was to this extent. We need to immediately cancel John's resignation, and please, Dad, you need to strictly scold Alex. He needs a father's stern love right now, Catherine urged. Her words seemed to awaken something in Mr. Smith. Maybe I don't have the right to scold him. I've always neglected our home, leaving everything up to him. Catherine, seeing the president look down dejectedly, raised her voice. Come on, what are you saying? It's because of you that Alex turned out this way. It's your responsibility to scold him. That's what's best for him. Mr. Smith then spent some time in deep thought, looking down. Eventually, he looked up and said, "All right, I'll try. Thank you, Catherine." He smiled at Catherine. Then he turned to me. "John, I'm sorry my son caused you trouble. We'll cancel your resignation. I'm counting on you to come back to work tomorrow." "Yes, Mr. Smith. Thank you." I thanked the president. The next day, Alex was transferred to a subsidiary's restaurant to work on site. It was arranged to keep his identity as the president's son a secret there and to ensure he starts from the ground up, working hard. Mr. Smith apparently had a talk with his son the night before. He scolded him about his behavior towards me and his poor work attitude. I hope this leads Alex to reflect and change his ways. Anyway, it all turned out well. Thanks to your help, John. I really appreciate it. I hardly did anything. That's not true. Facing the president, even if he's my father, was nerve-wracking. This whole thing worked out because you were there with me, Catherine said, smiling brightly. After that, Catherine and I began talking more and often went out for drinks after work. And surprisingly, Catherine and I started dating. It turns out she had broken up with her boyfriend a while ago. I've actually been thinking you were quite nice for some time now. In the dim light of a stylish bar, being told that by the most beautiful woman in the office, I couldn't help but fall for her. She was already my type, and I had been holding back my feelings. But if our relationship goes well and leads to marriage, I'll end up becoming Alex's brother-in-law. I hope he becomes a decent person by then. With these thoughts, I might be getting ahead of myself, but I couldn't help poking fun at myself as I continued to work hard every day.